Part 1. Unexpected Assignment, Expanded. Dr. James Mitchell had been working as the station dentist for almost 3 years now, and honestly, the job was getting pretty boring. He spent his days fixing cracked molars for tired engineers, cleaning teeth for office workers who drank too much coffee, and dealing with the occasional space sickness patient who had thrown up all over his chair. It was steady work, good pay, and nobody really bothered him much. He lived in a small apartment on level 7 of the orbital station, spent his evenings reading old novels, and thought maybe this was how his whole life would go: comfortable, quiet, and totally predictable. Then came the night everything changed. The emergency call came at 2 a.m. James had been asleep, dreaming about nothing important, when his communication system started blaring. He jolted awake, heart racing, thinking maybe there was an accident on the station. But the voice on the other end wasn't a coworker asking for help. It was formal, official, and unlike anything he'd ever heard before. Dr. Mitchell. This is Commander Vex of the Draconic Imperial Guard. You are being formally requested to assist with a medical emergency. A vessel will arrive at your quarters in 10 minutes. This is not a request. It is a summons from the Empress herself. James just sat there in his dark bedroom trying to understand what he'd just heard. The Draconic Empire? He'd never even met one of them in person. Sure, he'd seen them around the station sometimes, tall, scaled creatures who kept to themselves mostly, but he certainly wasn't any kind of expert on their biology. He was just a regular dentist who fixed regular teeth. He tried to say something, but the line had already gone dead. He threw on clothes and was standing outside his quarters when the vessel arrived. It was sleek and black, with symbols he couldn't read glowing on the sides. 2 draconic guards stepped out, their scales shimmering under the station lights. They didn't say much, just gestured for him to get in. James grabbed his emergency medical kit without really thinking about it and climbed aboard. The ride down to Draconis Prime was intense. James had taken transports before, but nothing like this. The ship cut through the atmosphere so fast it made his stomach flip. He pressed his face against the window and watched the clouds below, trying to slow his breathing. What did they need a human dentist for? What kind of emergency involved an alien species asking for him specifically? He didn't even know his name was known to them. As they descended, the planet came into view. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Massive crystal structures jutting up from the landscape, towers that seemed to touch the clouds, and city lights that stretched across the horizon like nothing he'd ever seen before. His hands were sweating. He kept thinking he was about to make a huge mistake, that he should have said no, that this was crazy. The palace was the most impressive thing he'd ever seen in his life. It rose up from the ground like it had grown there, all obsidian black stone and golden domes that caught the light from 3 different suns. The architecture was nothing like human buildings. Everything was dramatic and bold. The guards escorted him through massive doors and down hallways that seemed to go on forever, their footsteps echoing on polished stone floors. Then they reached the medical chamber and everything went wrong at once. James heard the noise before he saw anything, a sound like nothing he'd ever heard before, somewhere between a scream and a roar. When the guards led him inside, he saw a baby dragon thrashing around the room like it was in pure agony. The creature couldn't have been more than 6 feet long, its scales bright blue and silver, but it was destroying everything around it. Its tail smashed into stone walls, leaving cracks. Flames burst from its mouth, scorching the ceiling and making the attendants jump back in fear. The tooth was instantly visible to someone with James's training. It was dark green with infection oozing out of the gum line. The baby dragon's whole face was swollen on one side. No wonder it was in pain. That kind of infection would be excruciating for any creature. 3 draconic physicians were standing off to the side, looking completely helpless. They had expensive-looking instruments and scrolls full of information, but none of it seemed to be working. The baby dragon wouldn't let anyone near it. Every time someone tried to approach, it lashed out with teeth and claws. A tall female guard with sharp features and serious eyes stepped forward. Her name was Captain Elena, and she had this calm authority about her that made even the panicking dragon seem to notice. She looked directly at James, and he could see the fear underneath her tough exterior. "Can you help him?" she asked, her clawed hand gripping the edge of her weapon. It wasn't really a question, it was a plea. "The young prince is the Emperor's only son. If we lose him..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. James stood there, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on him. He was just a dentist. Just a regular human who fixed teeth for people sitting in comfortable chairs. He'd never treated anything like this, never worked under this kind of pressure, never been responsible for someone this important. The baby dragon screamed again and James knew he had to do something. He swallowed hard and said the only thing he could think of. I can try. James took one step forward and the baby dragon absolutely lost it. The creature's eyes locked onto him and before anyone could react, it lunged with its mouth wide open. Teeth like daggers snapped at the air where James's face had been just a second before. The guards and attendants rushed in to grab the dragon's neck and wings, trying to hold it back, but the creature was stronger than it looked. It thrashed against their grip with pure desperation, its whole body convulsing. Easy, easy, James said, holding his hands up. I'm not here to hurt you. But the dragon wasn't listening. It didn't care about calm voices or gentle gestures. Pain and fear had completely taken over. The more people tried to hold it down, the more it panicked. Its thrashing became even more violent, more chaotic. Its tail whipped around like a weapon, and when it connected with a decorative stone pillar that had stood in that chamber for probably centuries, the pillar just shattered. Pieces of rock crashed to the floor and everyone jumped back. Then the flames came. The dragon's fear turned into raw instinct, and fire burst from its nostrils in two thick streams. The heat was incredible. James felt it from across the room like standing in front of an open furnace. The flames shot straight up and blackened the ceiling. Tapestries that had been hanging on the walls caught fire immediately. A couple of the attendants screamed and ran for water. The smell of burning cloth and scorched stone filled the air. James's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. This wasn't going the way he'd hoped. This wasn't going any way at all. He'd walked into a room expecting a sick animal that needed treatment, but what he was actually looking at was a terrified child in absolute agony, lashing out at everything around it. One of the draconic physicians, an older male with deep blue scales and wise-looking eyes, stepped over to James. His name was Dr. Vorn and he looked defeated. We have tried everything, he said quietly. Every calming agent we have. Every remedy passed down through generations. Nothing works. The infection is spreading too fast, and the pain is driving the young prince into hysteria. We have maybe minutes before it goes septic. Once that happens. He didn't need to finish. James understood. Sepsis meant poison spreading through the bloodstream. Sepsis meant death. James's mind started racing, running through every option he knew. What about sedatives? Strong ones? Knock him out completely so we can work? We tried, another physician said, shaking her head. Our strongest medications have no effect on dragons. Their metabolism is completely different from other species. What would put a human into deep sleep barely makes them drowsy. And what's strong enough to work could damage the young prince's organs. We cannot risk it. James watched the baby dragon thrashing, its movements becoming more frantic if that was even possible. One of those massive wings caught an attendant in the shoulder and knocked him sideways into a wall. The dragon's tail whipped around again, and this time it smashed through a decorative vase that looked like it was probably worth more than James made in a year. Nobody seemed to care about the vase anymore. He looked at the infected tooth. It was worse than he'd initially thought. The green infection had spread down into the gum line, and the whole side of the dragon's face was swollen to almost twice its normal size. The fever radiating off the creature was visible now. The air around it actually shimmered like heat waves rising off hot pavement. This little dragon was burning from the inside out, and it knew something was terribly wrong. The tooth has to come out, James said firmly. That's the source of the infection. Once we remove it and clean out the infection, the fever should drop. But I can't do it while he's like this. One thrash of that tail and I'm dead. One snap of those jaws and my arm's gone. He watched the dragon's eyes for a moment. They were wild and terrified, but underneath all the panic and pain, James could see something else. He could see a child. This wasn't some monster or alien creature that didn't matter. This was a baby. A scared, sick baby who didn't understand what was happening to him, who was in more pain than he could handle, and who was lashing out because that was all he knew how to do. The older physician, Dr. Vorn, was arguing with Captain Elena about something. James wasn't really listening. His eyes stayed on the dragon, watching it thrash, watching it suffer. Everyone in the room was in panic mode. Everyone was thinking about failure, about the Empress, about consequences. But James was a dentist. He'd worked with scared kids before. He'd worked with anxious patients. He'd learned that sometimes the solution to a problem wasn't about forcing it or overpowering it. Sometimes you had to think differently. Sometimes you had to actually understand what the other person needed. And right then, standing in a burning palace chamber with a dying dragon and the weight of an empire on his shoulders, James had an idea. It was desperate. It was ridiculous. It probably wouldn't work. But it was the only thing he had left. He reached into his medical kit and pulled out a small bottle of soap he'd bought from a vendor months ago and kept absently in his pocket. His hands were shaking, but he knew this was his only shot. James stood there for a moment, staring at the small bottle of soap in his hand. It seemed so stupid now. He'd bought this stuff months ago from a street vendor on the station. Some kind of fancy hand soap that was supposed to be good for your skin or whatever. He never really used it much. It just sat in his medical kit, taking up space. Why had he kept it? He couldn't even remember. But right now, looking at this panicked baby dragon destroying a palace, stupid was all he had. He also remembered the wire ring in his pocket. It was part of an old puzzle toy he'd been playing with during the flight down, something to keep his hands busy while he was nervous. A simple metal ring bent into a loop. Perfect for blowing bubbles if you really thought about it. Captain Elena saw what he was holding and started to protest. "What are you doing? We need to." But James didn't wait to hear the rest. He was already moving toward the dragon, ignoring the guards who tried to grab his arm and hold him back. "Let me try something," he said. "Please. Just trust me for 30 seconds. He walked slowly toward the baby dragon, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. The creature snapped at him again, but James didn't flinch. He'd learned a long time ago that scared animals could sense fear. He knelt down on one knee, getting lower, making himself less threatening. The dragon was still thrashing, but something about James's calmness seemed to register. He pulled out a small cup from a side table and poured a little water into it. Then he opened the soap bottle and mixed it carefully, making sure to get the right consistency. The whole time he was talking in a low, steady voice. "It's okay, buddy. I know you're scared. I know you're hurting. But I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." He kept repeating variations of this, not really expecting the dragon to understand the words, but hoping it would understand the tone. "I've got you. You're going to be okay. Just watch for a second. Just watch what I'm about to show you." He held the wire ring up to his lips. The dragon's head turned slightly, tracking the movement with those wild, terrified eyes. The creature was still in pain, still panicking, but for just a moment, curiosity flickered across its face. James blew gently into the ring. The first bubble emerged, perfect and delicate. It was translucent, catching the light from the chamber's glowing crystals. For a moment, it hung in the air between them, shimmering with colors that seemed to shift and change. It floated slowly upward, wobbling slightly as it moved. The baby dragon's entire body went rigid. Its thrashing stopped. Its flames died down. Its head snapped upward, following the bubble as it rose. Every muscle in the creature's body tensed, focused on that one small floating sphere. Something deep in the dragon's brain, something ancient and instinctive, had completely locked onto this new strange thing. James blew another bubble. Then another. Soon there was a cascade of bubbles drifting through the medical chamber, each one catching the light and shimmering in slightly different ways. They floated upward in lazy spirals, some popping when they touched the ceiling, others drifting down and dissipating into nothing. The effect was hypnotic. And the baby dragon was completely mesmerized. The creature's breathing slowed. Its muscles, which had been coiled tight with panic and pain, began to relax. Its eyes tracked each bubble as it rose, following them from the moment they emerged from the ring until they disappeared. The dragon actually sat down, its massive tail curling around its body. It was still sick, still fevered, still infected, but it had stopped fighting. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. The guards who had been braced for another attack stood frozen in shock. The physicians watched with expressions of disbelief. Captain Elena's hand slowly released her weapon. Dr. Vorn actually stepped forward, his eyes wide with something that looked like hope. James kept blowing bubbles steadily, moving them around the chamber in a slow pattern. He was moving closer to the dragon with each breath, but the creature didn't care. All it cared about was the bubbles. They were the only real thing in the world now, just those beautiful, floating, shimmering spheres of soap and air. "Good boy," James whispered. "That's it. Just watch the bubbles. You're doing great." He reached into his medical kit with one hand while continuing to blow bubbles with the other. His fingers found the numbing gel, the extraction instruments, the cleaning solutions. Everything he needed was right there. The dragon didn't move. It didn't flinch. It just sat there, completely absorbed by the bubbles, its golden eyes reflecting their shimmer. James worked as fast as he could, but carefully. He applied the numbing gel to the infected tooth. He waited 30 seconds for it to take effect. Then, in one smooth motion, he used his extraction tool to loosen and remove the tooth. The infected green mass came free, releasing pus and infected material that he immediately flushed away with antiseptic solution. 8 minutes. That's all it took. The baby dragon never moved. Never fought. Never even seemed to notice that the source of all its pain had been removed. It was too busy watching the bubbles, following them as they drifted and popped and disappeared. By the time James finished and stepped back, the fever in the air had already started to decrease. The infection was gone. The poison was out. And a human dentist with a bottle of hand soap had just saved the Emperor's son using nothing but bubbles and a little bit of creative thinking. James continued blowing bubbles even as he stepped backward, giving the dragon some space. The creature was barely awake now, its breathing slow and steady, its eyes half closed. Every once in a while it would track a bubble with its gaze, but mostly it just sat there, calm and peaceful. The fever shimmer had faded from around its body. The swelling in its face was already starting to go down. The infected tooth was gone, and with it, the source of all that terrible pain. For the first time since he'd arrived at the palace, James felt like he could actually breathe. His hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was pure adrenaline wearing off, the realization that he'd actually done it. He'd walked into an impossible situation and somehow found a solution that worked. A baby dragon that had been seconds away from death was now sleeping peacefully, and James had made that happen. He kept blowing bubbles anyway just to be safe. One more then another. The dragon's eyes followed them lazily. That's when the entire chamber went absolutely silent. It wasn't a gradual thing. It was sudden and complete, like someone had just turned off all the sound in the world. James looked up from the bubbles, confused. The guards who had been moving around, attending to the fires and cleaning up the damage, all froze in place. The physicians stopped what they were doing. Captain Elena, who had been standing near the wall, snapped to attention so fast it was like she'd been hit by lightning. Everyone's eyes shifted to the same spot. Behind a ceremonial screen decorated with gold and jewels, a shadow moved. Then she emerged. James's breath literally caught in his throat. If the baby dragon had been impressive, the adult dragon, the Empress, was something else entirely. She was massive, easily 3 times the size of her son, with scales that didn't just reflect light but seemed to glow from within. Her scales were burnished gold on her chest and belly, but her back and head were deep crimson, dark as blood. Her eyes were ancient. James couldn't think of any other word for it. They were eyes that had seen empires rise and fall, eyes that held thousands of years of memory and wisdom and power. She moved slowly, deliberately, with absolute grace. Every step was measured and careful, like she was walking through a sacred ritual. Her tail, easily 20 feet long, trailed behind her, and the tip of it glowed faintly with an ethereal light. James's entire body went rigid. He stood there, still holding the soap and the wire ring, completely frozen. His mind was screaming at him to do something, bow, run, say something, anything, but his body wouldn't obey any of those commands. He was locked in place, unable to move, barely able to breathe. The Empress approached her son first. She lowered her massive head and looked down at the small dragon sleeping peacefully, still occasionally glancing at the bubbles James was nervously still blowing. Her expression was impossible to read. Was she angry? Was she grieving? Was she furious that a human had been allowed to touch her child? She examined the space where the infected tooth had been, studying the cleaning work James had done. She observed her son's breathing, the steadiness of it, the peace in the young dragon's face. For what felt like an eternity she just stood there looking at her healed child. Then she turned to look at James. The moment her ancient eyes locked onto him, James felt his knees actually weaken. This was it. This was the moment where he found out whether he was about to be rewarded or executed or something worse. The Empress of the Draconic Empire, ancient and powerful beyond measure, was looking directly at him. She moved toward him slowly. James wanted to back away, but his feet wouldn't move. He just stood there, clutching his ridiculous soap bottle and wire ring, feeling smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. The Empress stopped just a few feet away from him. This close, James could feel the heat radiating from her scales. She was like a living furnace, ancient and powerful and absolutely terrifying. Her head was level with his body, her eyes at about the same height as his face. For a long moment she just looked at him. Really looked at him. Not the way you'd look at a servant or an employee. She was studying him, understanding him, seeing him. Then she spoke. Her voice was like distant thunder rolling across mountains. It was deep and resonant and seemed to come from somewhere beneath the earth itself. But it wasn't angry. If anything, it sounded almost thoughtful. "The human," she said slowly. "You did not force. You did not demand. You did not command the young prince to obey you." She paused and James held his breath. "You understood." James didn't know what to say. His mouth was dry. He managed to nod slightly, not trusting his voice to work. The Empress tilted her head slightly, studying him from a different angle. My physicians wanted to overpower him with strength and medicine. My guards wanted to restrain him with force. You saw a child in pain and you gave him peace instead of compliance. She looked back at her son, sleeping soundly now. You gave him wonder. You gave him something better than drugs or power. She turned back to James and something in her expression had shifted. It wasn't warmth exactly, but it was something like respect. Something like understanding. Tell me, human. What is your name? James, he said quietly. Dr. James Mitchell. Well, Dr. James Mitchell, the Empress said, and there was almost something like amusement in her voice now. You have healed my son. And in doing so, you have taught me something important about your species. You think differently than we do. She smiled, and it was terrifying and beautiful all at once. I think, she continued, that humans should have a place in my empire. Not as servants or workers, but as thinkers. As solvers of problems. As bridges between what is and what could be. 3 days after the bubble incident, the Empress made her official announcement. James Mitchell was being appointed as royal physician to the imperial household. It came with a massive salary, housing in the palace itself, and authority that most humans couldn't even imagine. When the offer was presented to him in formal documents that required his signature, James actually laughed out loud. A week ago he'd been cleaning teeth on a space station. Now he was a royal physician to an alien empire. He accepted without hesitation. But that was just the beginning. What James didn't realize was that the story of what happened in that medical chamber was already spreading. Word travels fast in any civilization, but in the Draconic Empire, word traveled at the speed of gossip, which is faster than anything else in the universe. The image of a human dentist calmly blowing bubbles to save the Emperor's son captured people's imagination in ways that treaties and formal agreements never could. The story became legendary almost overnight. In the palace, servants whispered about it. In the cities, merchants discussed it in marketplaces. In the universities, scholars debated what it meant. A human had solved an impossible problem. Not through force or advanced technology or magical knowledge. Through compassion and creativity. Through understanding what the baby dragon actually needed instead of trying to force what the humans thought he should accept. It was revolutionary. It completely changed how the Draconic Empire thought about humanity. Within 2 weeks, the Empress issued an official proclamation. She announced that the Draconic Empire would be opening dedicated channels specifically for human medical professionals and specialists. Not just dentists but doctors, surgeons, researchers, psychologists, healers of all kinds. The message was clear. Humans had something different to offer, something valuable that couldn't be found anywhere else. The response was massive. Universities across human space got the news and started organizing teams of specialists. Medical schools sent their best graduates. Research hospitals competed with each other to get positions in the Draconic Empire. Pharmaceutical companies, surgical teams, psychiatric specialists, rehabilitation experts, everyone wanted to be part of this new opportunity. It wasn't just money, though the money was incredible. It was the chance to work with an entirely new species, to solve problems that had never been solved before, to be part of something genuinely historic. Back on the orbital station, Dr. Patricia Webb was working through her usual morning routine when her computer chimed with an incoming message marked urgent and official. She almost deleted it without reading, assuming it was spam, but something made her open it. What she read made her eyes go wide. It was a formal communication from the Draconic Empire, addressed to the station administration. It was offering exclusive contracts for human medical professionals. The terms were extraordinary: triple standard pay rates, full benefits, housing, research funding, authority in the workplace. The message specifically mentioned that these offers had been issued on the recommendation of Dr. James Mitchell and the Empress of the Draconic Empire herself. Patricia read it 3 times, her brain struggling to process what she was seeing. Then she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that her assistant came running in, thinking something was wrong. When Patricia finally explained what had happened, the assistant just stared at her. Mitchell went down to fix a dragon's tooth, Patricia said, shaking her head in disbelief. And he somehow opened up the entire Draconic Empire to human professionals. How does that even happen? Word spread through the station like lightning. Within hours, dozens of medical professionals were requesting transfer forms. The quiet, boring space station was suddenly ground zero for what would become humanity's biggest leap into galactic acceptance. 6 months later, things had changed dramatically. James sat in the Imperial Palace garden on a warm afternoon, under 3 different suns. The garden was a magnificent place, with crystalline plants that sang in the breeze and water features that flowed upward instead of down. He was relaxing on a bench made from some kind of smooth stone, and next to him was a young dragon that was no longer quite so young. The dragon's name was Coryx, and he was healthier and happier than any young dragon had a right to be. James was blowing bubbles. Coryx chased them around the garden with pure joy, his wings spread wide, his flames carefully controlled so they didn't burn anything important. The young dragon would snap at the bubbles, chase them, lose them, and then come back for more. It had become their daily ritual. Sometimes James would blow hundreds of bubbles. Coryx never got tired of it. Somewhere in the palace, the Empress watched from a window, a small smile on her ancient face. She thought about everything that had changed in just 6 months. She thought about the human medical teams now working throughout the empire. She thought about the new solutions they were discovering, the different ways of thinking they brought to old problems. A simple human with a bottle of soap had done what armies of diplomats and centuries of careful negotiation could not. He had proven that different didn't mean inferior. He had shown that sometimes the best solution wasn't the most powerful one or the most complicated one. Sometimes it was the one that came from understanding, from compassion, from seeing another being not as a problem to solve but as a person to help. The Empress realized something that would change her perspective forever. Humans had a gift. Not for technology or weapons or military strategy. They had a gift for impossible solutions. They could see problems from angles that other species couldn't imagine. They could think sideways when the world demanded they think straight. And one human with a soap bottle had just opened a whole galaxy to that gift.